So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, elephants and zebras. So, tomorrow is voting day, and I wanted to put my 2 cents in about this. Um, I am probably going to vote for Gary Johnson. That's probably not definite. But who do I think is actually going to wind up in the White House? I think Hillary Clinton is going to wind up in the White House. Um, and the reason is actually very simple. She was chosen by the powers that be, so to speak, a long time ago to be the next president. Now, that doesn't mean she'll get the popular vote. Of course, we don't go by popular vote, do we? We go by the Electoral College. But I would prefer if we did go by the popular vote. But Donald Trump is a clown. I mean, if you look at some of the things he said and done, I mean, I don't really see how anybody could vote for him. He wanted Oprah Winfrey as his running mate. Keep that in mind. Both Hillary and Trump are essentially owned by some of the Middle Eastern countries. It's where they get most of their money, huge amounts of it, in fact. Um, but yeah, I think that's who was pre-chosen to be in the White House next year. Uh, I don't like Trump. I don't like Hillary. They're both horrible people, horrible human beings. And I remember the Clinton administrations. There were two, and I remember that Billy Boy uh, liked to say that his wife was his co-president, even though nobody elected her. And if you just look at the way both Hillary and Bill have treated women, come on now. You're going to get on Trump's case for the things he said and done when Hillary and Bill, come on now. They've treated women as pretty darn bad and still do. But, what my the biggest educational thing for me when it came to politics was years ago, and I would watch C-SPAN. And I noticed something. Whenever whenever there's some legislation up to be voted, both parties pretty much vote the same. The only time there's any real difference in the way they vote is when something is getting a lot of publicity. And then you'll have one party that will vote yay, primarily yay, and another party that will vote primarily nay. But then a few weeks later, they go in and they amend the legislation so they get what they wanted in the first place. I guess that's why, I mean, I have CNN, I'm not CNN, C-SPAN. I have C-SPAN, and I don't see the floor. I don't see them on the floor anymore. Now they have um, committee meetings. I've heard people on C-SPAN call in, well, do you think the next president will be able to do this or do that or change this or change that? The president doesn't technically have any power. The president basically signs legislation into law, but he or she does not make the legislation. Legislation is in the Congress, not the White House. The president has very little power. Signing legislation into law The president can veto the legislation, and then the Congress can overturn that veto, or they can go through the whole thing again and send it back to the president, and the president can sign it or veto it. But the signing statements and all this kind of nonsense, it's being misused. It's been misused for decades. Um, you just We do live in a country that more or less has a king, in part because that's what people want. And like I mentioned, people calling in to C-SPAN saying, well, do you think the next president will do this? Or the president doesn't have that power. But the people have allowed the presidents to get away with those things. So my education on the reality of what's going on was watching C-SPAN. Again, I don't see that on C-SPAN anymore. Now they have committee meetings. That's about it. They don't show the floor. When they did show the floor, 90% of the time, there was only 2 or 3 people in there. Sometimes only one person in there talking. But when the camera is only focused on the person speaking, you don't see the rest of the room. How are you to know? If it's live and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, then presumably there's not going to be that many people there. So there's no real debate. And the legislators, they don't write the legislation. They have other people do it for them, and not even their staff. They have the big corporations, they have the military industrial complex, they have all these people that write this legislation. And all they do is sign off on it. When, as a congressman, you have 20 pieces of legislation. Let's say you have 20 bills, because remember how the process goes. It's first a bill, then it becomes law, but there's things before that. But you have 20 pieces of proposed legislation, and each document's over 1,000 pages. It's full of technical uh, language, and you're gonna vote on that every day during the week, or you're gonna vote on one of those once a week. That's too much information for Congress people Congress critters to really know what's going on. It just, so, and then there are the issues with the legitimacy of the voting machines. There's the hacking. There is a video on YouTube where there's a guy who says, look, I was hired to do something, and that is, we make the final vote come out the way we want it to come out, i.e., the higher ups, the people that make the decision. And he was saying this before Congress in a committee meeting. So, regardless of how the votes actually are cast tomorrow, Hillary is going to be the one selected. She's already been selected. And, I see all this violence, and it reminds me of what was going on in Germany in the 20s and 30s. And that's pretty darn scary. Although I have seen some violence from Trump supporters, most of the violence I've seen has been from the Clinton camp. So, and there was also some violence from the what's his name, Sanders, from the Sanders camp. And I don't see anybody saying stop it, don't do it anymore. And that's sad and it's scary. I'm very afraid about what's going to happen to this country. Uh, I believe in liberty. I believe in freedom. believe in leaving people alone. I believe in not taxing people or um, putting too many rules or regulations on people. And the system we have now, it's great for the big guys, but for the common man, for the small business owner, it's not good. Too much to do, and they can't really get it all done quite right. That's why a lot of small business owners aren't really small business owners anymore. They are now, just a cog in the corporate wheels. But anyway, that's all I have to say.